Hey, everybody. Good evening. It is Tracy coming to you live from Golden Dog Adventure Company headquarters. I hope you're doing well. I'm here tonight with Tracy Barton Barrett. How are you, Tracy?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Tracy.
Yes, great name, by the way, in case I
Yes,
haven't said
yes.
that. So, guys, I'm really glad you're here with us tonight. We have a very important and sensitive topic that we want to present to you. And you may or may not know this is National Senior Pet Month. I know a lot of us do have senior pets or have loved and lived with senior pets, and we know obviously what comes as our pet gets older. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Tracy's going to kind of help us with some of those hard choices that we have to make as our pets age and as their health declines. So, tonight we're going to be talking about euthanasia and healing after pet loss. And we decided to move this from the Zoom room because, I figured Tracy and I would be talking to black boxes because this is an emotional topic and I didn't want people to feel uncomfortable. I want you to feel supported. We would love for you to engage with tonight's presentation if you're comfortable doing so. I know Tracy will pose some questions for feedback, but also you have to make this your own. You have to take this information how you can best consume it, and you have to do what's comfortable. So if you do not feel comfortable engaging with this, that is completely fine. I know you'll get bucket loads of information from this presentation, and if there's anything that you want to share with us, we welcome it. So I am going to have Tracy jump right into it because I know she's got a full presentation tonight. So Tracy, welcome. If you could tell us a little bit about what you do and about your expertise to get us started, that'd be fantastic.
Great. Thank you so much, Tracy. And thank you for this opportunity to talk about a subject that's really difficult and painful. But it's something that so many of us have to, at some point encounter.
Agreed.
So my name's Tracy Barton Barrett. I'm a licensed clinical mental health counselor in the state of North Carolina. And I work with clients on everything from career transitions to grief to depression as a mental health therapist. And I also have a specialty in pet loss. And I noticed when I was going through my training as a therapist, working with after losing a person, that there were so many similarities when you lose an animal. And nobody seemed to be talking about it. And I joke that I've been an animal lover since I was in utero. I mean, I came out looking for animals, I think. And they've been such an integral and important part of my life. And so I always consider it an honor to hold space for people when talking about this topic that is such a cruel reality for us.
Wonderful. Well, I know you've got a jam-packed presentation tonight, so I'm going to put it here into the stream.
Sure.
And we can jump into it. And if you folks have any questions at all, just feel free to comment. We'll get it here on our end and we'll get your questions answered by Tracy.
That sounds great. The other thing that I wanted to say is one of the biggest parts about this is just knowing that you're not alone. It's really, really, really important to understand that. I'm going to talk about that more a little bit later, how this still gets stigmatized as not as a valid grief, but we definitely know that it is a valid grief. So just an overview of what tonight's going to look like. I'm going to talk a little bit about the roles of our animals, how they show up in our lives, anticipatory grief, quality of life scale, euthanasia, behavioral euthanasia. What does grief look and feel like? Guilt and regret, whether or not to get another animal. And you might already have other animals, whether or not to get another one to add to your family. Meaning making, how do I know that I'm healing? Ways to honor and celebrate our beloved animals, and resources and support. And also, before we get started, I always like to light a candle in honor of our animals above my hand here, who either are on their way or are no longer physically here. So I do like to light that candle in their honor. One of the quotes I really love is, "Until one has loved an animal, a part of one's soul remains unawakened." I think that's a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah, I agree. I love that.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
It's just one of my favorites. So when Tracy originally reached out to me earlier this year, we had a our kitty Oliver Monkey. Um, as the summer went on, we unfortunately lost him July 3rd. And tomorrow is a 4-month anniversary. I'm going to talk later about the importance of anniversaries. So I do this work. One of the things is those of us that have been touched by animals, um, it's almost inevitable that we'll get to this end. Unfortunately, Oliver Monkey, we called him Monkey because he was a little monkey. It was a surprise to us. So this is more recent for me. So I have the empathy and come at this from a professional and a personal standpoint as well. But this is in honor of Monkey, especially.
Yeah, and he's beautiful.
Thank you. He's our little boy. He was our little guardian. So he was our guardian here. He would kind of do his rounds around the house. And now we feel like he's our little guardian angel. So if I were to ask you, how would you describe your animal other than a breed or their name? What would you say? Many people will say they're my babies. I use the term babies even without thinking, furry babies, hooved babies, feathered babies. But for tonight's discussion, our furry babies. Some people will say their animals are their soulmate, my heart, my life, my world. They're my best friend or my family member. And then if you grew up with the animal, sometimes my clients will say that they have a sibling dynamic, my puppy brother, my kitty sister. Sometimes it's a special connection if the animal, if it was the first animal that was truly yours. Either you left the house and you got the animal by yourself, or if it's the last animal you had, that can be difficult too. Some of us will call them our confidant or our support, especially during lockdown, which is such an unusual time for all of us. Now, many of our animals love the fact that we were around all the time, but just being able to share that moment in time with them was special. Some people will say that they're my anchor, they're my shadow, they're my safe place. And then any death or looming death creates this moment of looking at who we are, because our animals are often so much woven into our identity. And for so many people, it's like, who am I now? Who am I now without this animal? And that can create a real difficulty for us. The other thing, too, is that if people truly don't understand companion animal loss, the thing is they're a part of our daily life. They're part of our daily rhythm, daily routine. And the greeting that they do for us is just amazing. And so, when you think about your schedule right now, we wake up in the morning, or they get us up. That's why we love them, right? They get us up, and then we take them on a walk, or give them their meds, or feed them, or take the noon walk, morning walk, evening walk. We tuck them in at night. I mean, whatever our rhythm and our routine is, that gets disrupted. Even if we have other babies in the house, their dynamic has shifted within their animal world, and our dynamic has shifted with them. So there's a lot of shifting that can happen after an animal dies. Also, animals can show up as emotional support animals or service animals, therapy dogs. And then I like to say that animals represent different times or chapters of our lives. It could be the dog we had as a child, or the puppy we had in college, or the animal we had before we got married, or the dog we had before children, or single, or separated, or divorced, or when the children left the house, or when we left, or our partner died. And so for some people, it can feel like an end of an era, like that connection that tethered us to that chapter of our life is gone. So that's something we call secondary losses. So it's a loss as a result of the primary loss. And again, that's why sometimes grieving and making this decision about euthanasia can be so difficult. So does anybody have any thoughts or questions? Please feel free to say that in the chat, and Tracy can let me know Um, if there's anything anybody had any thoughts or things come up for them as we're talking here.
Yeah, I absolutely will.
Okay. So I just want to make sure I did this. When is the right time? This is as they used to say, the $64,000 question, right? Some things that can help guide and inform this very, very difficult decision. There's something called anticipatory grief, and this is the grieving that occurs before the death. And it usually looks one of two ways with companion animal loss. One, the animal's starting to get older, and you're starting to have to think about the end. Or two, you just got a poor prognosis from the vet. And that poor prognosis from the vet can be months, it can be weeks, it can be days, it can be hours, depending upon when you get that. So that grieving that happens before the death is anticipatory grief. And that's usually where people are when they've just received a poor prognosis from the vet. Now I've got to start really thinking about this, and it's really hard. So some things that can help. It won't alleviate the grief on the back end, but it can help. So just making a plan, starting some end of life things, details, getting some things put together. So things like, are you going to cremate or bury? If you're going to cremate, do you know the crematorium you're going to use? If you're going to bury, and you've checked with your local laws, because every area is different about that, where are you going to bury? Who's going to be in the room when it happens? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be somebody else? Can a vet come out? Is there a service where you live where a vet can actually come out to the house? What is their availability? The thing with our little monkey kitty is it was around the 4th of July. And if you're outside the US, July 4th weekend is a very busy holiday weekend here. And it was very difficult to find a vet to come out when we needed him. We finally found a vet, but it was hard. It was hard because we just received the poor prognosis. Then we had to kind of scramble to find a vet. One of the things, though, about grieving is that it is a very individual process. And so some people might not want a vet to come out because they don't want the death of their animal associated with their home. And then other people want a vet to come out because they don't want to take their animal in to the clinic where there's noises and sounds and smells, which could stress out their animal. So there's something called the quality of life scale. I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. But some things also that can help are just taking pics and videos. And even if you're somebody who can't look at them after the death, it's better to have them and not look at them than wish you had taken them. So I encourage just taking pics and videos of just anything and everything. I know with our little monkey man, anything he did, I don't know how many gigs we used on our phones, taking some fur, not whiskers while they're still with us. But another thing we did was take a video of his whole body. It was like a body scan. So we started at his head and then slowly went down so we could just see every part of him, of his body, all the way down to his tail, all the way down to his toe beams. So we got a video of his whole body before he was still alive when we took that. We also like to take a picture of his paw in our hand. That was something that was important to us. And I'm going to talk about this later, of making this what works for you, because the grieving is individual. Also, writing a goodbye letter. That might be something helpful. Some people will do that afterwards, but then some people will do it before. So whatever works, if that's something, if you're a writer, if you enjoy writing, that might be something. I wrote an ode to Monkey. That was something, and I read it to him because I wanted that to be one of the last things he heard. So whatever works for you, And believe me, it was very difficult to get through. I was crying very hard, but it was something that was important to me, um, and my husband, both of us, for that to be one of the last things he hears. Also, in this time before the euthanasia, special food treats, activities, I mean, whatever they want at this point, and then just cherishing every moment. So, anybody have any thoughts or comments in the chat?
Not as of yet. Nope.
It's fine.
But yep, feel free to just leave a comment, guys, if you have a question or you just want to share something about your pet. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Please do. Please do. So, the quality of life scale, some of you might be familiar with this. Dr. Alice Villalobos created this. So, basically, each of these H's and the last two M's there, they get a score of 1 to 10, and they just add up. It just adds a numeric value to things. Like, basically, how are they eating? How are they drinking? Peeing, pooping, better days than not. I mean, looking at their whole life, looking at pain management, hunger, hydration, and then just adding everything up at the end. Because again, this can be a very emotional time. So sometimes it's helpful to have criteria there that you can check with the vet, because many vets will sit down with their clients and go over this and ask, is your pet eating? Does hand feeding help? I mean, really looking at those things, because, if an animal stops eating, that's a really big indication that something's not right.
Yeah.
And then hydration of the tent on the skin, on the head, does it snap back? These types of things, just looking at the overall quality of life.
Yeah, this scale is really helpful. We had 2 cats that were senior cats. One had a tumor in her lung, and we knew the inevitable was coming, but it was really hard to judge on her quality of life until really the very end. So we had kind of set a date because it was around Christmas that they were failing in health, and we were worried about the kids and the holiday and how that would affect them in the future. And, so we had set, the death date, if you will. We had a veterinarian who was coming to the house. But interestingly, the night before, my oldest son lives in Jersey City. So we all got on the phone together and we talked about it. And we said, they're doing well, they're eating, they're drinking, they're still playing with toys. I don't feel good about this. They didn't feel good about it. And we agreed as a family to wait. And, I have to say that was really helpful to me, because I thought my family was relying on me to make the decision. So when I could get the kids on the phone and get their buy-in, because they're both adults now, I have to tell you that was a huge relief to get the family's buy-in and take that burden off my shoulders.
Yeah.
So having, if I had had this prior, maybe it would have made it a little bit easier, but this is a great example.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that too, Tracy. And that you reached out to your family, like you said, that they're able to be on board with everything too, and that it was a relief. That actually happened with one of our other kitties too, where we had the death date planned, but we're watching him, and we watched him like a hawk. I mean, we watched everything about him, but he seemed fine. And, you want to hold on to as long as you can. And so we pushed it back a day. Now, that literally was the last day as far as his quality of life. But having that extra 24 hours really made all the difference for us. So,
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So, euthanasia. This is very, let me go back here. Sorry about that. So some of the things with euthanasia are that you've seen before on the previous, but I did want to say one thing about euthanasia is that it literally means good death. That's what the word means, good death, when you break it down. And that's what we try to do. That's our intention, right? When we talk about a behavioral euthanasia, though, this is where it can get more complicated, right? Um, Now, so a couple things I'm going to talk about with behavioral euthanasia might not apply uh, like it would if the animal had cancer, for example. So some of the clients that I've seen when it comes to behavioral euthanasia, they'll often say things like, I failed him. Even though I literally tried everything I could to save him, I failed him. I should have been able to save him. I've done it with so many other reactive dogs before. Why not him? If any of that rings true, please feel free to share that in the chat. And I did also wanted to mention at the beginning that just to acknowledge everybody's decision to be here tonight or to listen into this, because this is a very difficult and agonizing um, decision and time to place to be in your life. So I just wanted to affirm everybody's decision to be here or listen in tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, because this is hard. This is, and I never sugarcoat this. It is hard, and um, sometimes we don't always have the perfect ending that we want for our babies, and that can be a painful thing as well. So, but again, knowing other people have been through this, are going through it, and can truly empathize is a big part of the healing process as well. But for those of you who have reactive dogs, for example, or you have a dog that you've lost sleep and days from work. I've had clients definitely say that. You miss social gatherings, having people over, because, if you have people over in the animal space, they are not predictable, and that can be difficult. It can be all consuming. You might have gone to numerous vets, various trainers, special behaviorists, supplements you've used, walking on eggshells, going into debt. Now you're running out of options and you're tired. So one of the things that I always talk about is the word should and shoulding on yourself, basically. That the word should, there's very few things in the world that we should or shouldn't do, but the word should really can turn into like a finger wagging thing, like you should do that or shouldn't do that. And that rarely inspires change. And so all it is shame. So just encourage you to think of it that way. And because many people also say, well, how can I possibly let myself off the hook on this? The other thing to think about too is this idea of being the hero for the animal and the savior complex. And savior complex can definitely happen with people to people, but it can definitely happen when it comes to animals that are more reactive, have aggression issues, dominance issues. And the thing is, when it comes to what the savior complex really is when a person has a need to save other people or animals at the expense of their own needs. And so your resources now are wearing thin, your emotional resources are wearing thin, your financial resources are wearing thin, your psychological resources are wearing thin. So I really encourage you to, if this is a part of your grieving process, to work on the compassion and grace part of this, and that see if the savior complex rings true for you. Because if you're getting to the end of that, it really is the metaphor for an airplane, putting the oxygen mask on first, because at some point you will burn out, and that will affect other areas of your life too. So it's just something to really think about. And then allow yourself to feel some relief. I had one client who had done all of this with her dog, and she kind of whispered to me, I actually feel a little bit of relief now. Now, she was sobbing from the grief, but part of it is that she did feel some relief. She said, I can have people over now. I literally couldn't have people over. And actually, her husband couldn't always be next to her because the dog would sometimes go after him. And so now they were able to come together more as a couple. So the thing about grieving and especially with complex and complicated things, such as a behavioral euthanasia, is that grieving is more of a back and forth, up and down process rather than a checklist. Like 1 stage done, 2 stage done, 3 stage done. It's rarely that way. Grief is rarely linear. It's rarely linear. So we can have these feelings that seem contradictory at the same time. I'm sobbing so hard I can hardly see, and I also feel a little relief.
Mm.
So it's just something to keep in mind and allow ourselves to have the whole spectrum of human emotion when it comes to this, especially something as complex as behavioral euthanasia. The other thing, too, is for some people with any euthanasia, behavioral or not, sometimes it might need to be processed as a trauma, especially if it's sudden and or unexpected. So just something to keep in mind when it comes to that. Any thoughts come up or anything in the chat? I just want to make sure.
No, just a comment from someone that this is very emotional. Brings back a lot of stuff with her previous 4 dogs.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that, because that's going to help with the grieving process too, for sure. Thank you for that comment. So grief is a natural reaction to the loss of something or someone to which there is an attachment or a value placed upon. And I bolded the word natural on purpose. It's important not to pathologize grief. This is it is the one of the emotions that almost every, I dare say, every human is going to have to deal with in one form or another. So as the saying goes, grief is love with no place to go. But our grief needs a voice and it needs a place to go. And I'll talk a little bit later about some things that can help with that process. It also forces you into a world you weren't ready for, or maybe you never wanted. It's like, how do I live now? Like I talked about before, but I don't want to think about, I really don't want to think about my animal not being here. And yet here I am. Right? It's rarely a linear process. I said that. And this last one is really, really important. Closure is really a myth when it comes to grieving. Rarely are you going to be completely done, like shut the book, put the book on the shelf, I'm done with grieving, thank goodness. It's very, very rare that that's going to happen. And I say that to normalize the grieving process, because some people's anxiety will actually rise when they're like, oh my gosh, I thought I worked on this. It's been 5 years and I'm triggered again. And it's like, well, this is basically how grieving works. I'll talk a little bit later about how we know we're really moving through that. But just to give yourself some understanding that it's okay. I'll just say it this way. We don't really get over it. We get through it and we grow around it. It becomes a part of us. That's the grieving process rather than I'm done, next. It's very, very rare, especially when you have a strong connection to the animal.
I wanted to mention too, when I was going through your slides prior to going live, I thought that was a really powerful statement, how you grow with grief. But you're right, it will always be part of you. And just, being a part of support groups and communities like what we foster, and understanding coping mechanisms and things like that, I think is just really, really important.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm glad that was helpful, because sometimes there's just a misunderstanding of what the grieving process looks like.
Agreed.
It's kind of let ourselves off the hook a little bit. I mean, that it's much more complex.
Yeah.
So what can grief look and feel like? Loneliness is a big thing for many people, especially when it comes to companion animal loss, because they're such wonderful companions. I mean, they're just amazing little beings, or big beings, depending on, how big our babies are, right? Also devastation, many people, anxiety. So if you struggle with managing anxiety already, your anxiety might rise a little bit during the grieving process. So just allowing space for that is important. Anger is definitely a part of grieving. There's nothing inherently wrong with anger. We are hardwired for it, and we feel angry when our boundaries are stepped on and or to injustice. And so if, we had to euthanize a 3-year-old dog due to reactivity or whatever issues, it's understandable to feel angry about that. Um, or just feeling angry that you had to make the decision about euthanasia anyway. I've had many clients that say, I don't want to make this decision. I actually would rather just them go without me naturally. I don't want to make this decision, yet I don't want them to suffer. So anger is often a part of grieving. Many people say the world has lost its color. I've lost a limb. Heard that many times. And there is something called grief brain, basically, where that's where you feel lost, you feel disoriented, times feels warped. You might have issues with concentration, with focus. You ask somebody a question, you're like, I know I asked you that, but what was the answer? So just knowing that this is a real thing, grief brain. And then there's that first morning without them, the first week, the first 2 weeks, first 2 months. Sometimes it feels like we're going backward. And this is a really important thing again, that again, rarely is the grieving process linear. It can feel like things are going backward because sometimes things are becoming more real. Sometimes we'll numb out or shut down, but then as things start to become more apparent and real, it might feel like the emotions are starting to come up. And then it feels like, oh my gosh, I thought I worked on this or whatever, but really, this is the process of grief. And I like to say that the waves, grief comes in waves, like it's like standing ankle deep in the ocean, and you feel the waves of grief lap against your shin. And then it's like, okay, I feel them, I'm still here. Then sometimes the waves lap against your waist, and you're like, okay, I'm really feeling it now, and I'm really not liking this. And then you have those waves of grief that just come up over you and knock you flat. And if it's a big loss, it's probably going to happen at some point where you just get knocked down by it. The thing is that the important thing to remember about that is it's not about getting knocked down by the waves of grief. It's about standing back up, because almost everybody has been knocked down at one point. But one of the ways that you know that you're working through it is it doesn't feel like the waves of grief are knocking you flat as much anymore. That's how you know. Also, grief, as I said before, this companion animal loss is often still stigmatized, and it's called a disenfranchised grief, which means it's not looked at as being a valid grief, but as I mentioned before, it definitely is. And one loss can be a trigger for previous unresolved losses. So that is the thing about grief, is it will sit and wait until it gets processed and acknowledged and space to it. It almost takes up volume. It's almost like a volume to it. So then it'll piggyback on the next grief. And now you've got two griefs, two big losses that you've got to deal with. There's something called cumulative grief, and this is when big losses happen in a relatively short period of time. So they don't necessarily have to be deaths. They could be a loss of a job, a loss of a relationship. But that's something that can also happen for some people. I've had clients say that they lost their father around the time they lost their dog. That would be an example of cumulative grief. The thing about cumulative grief is each loss needs its own due. So, because sometimes it can get squished into one, I picture it like a big muddied mess. So part of the healing process is to go through and give the loss of your father attention and space, the loss of your dog, attention and space. Secondary losses, I had mentioned that before. Those are the losses of things that happen as a result of the primary loss. So the primary loss would be the the loss of the dog. So things like loss of connection to other dog people, loss of getting outside the house, loss of people at the dog park, loss of, those types of losses that come as a result of the primary loss. And that's a big part of the grieving process as well. The other thing are what we call linking objects. And these are things that used to belong to the one that has died. So in this case, leashes, collars, food, bowls, beds, stuffies, blankets, all those. And sometimes, what do we do with that? And that again is a very individual, very, very, very individual decision. I knew one person that said, when I go to the vet for the euthanasia, when I come home, she asked her neighbor, her friend actually, to come in and take everything out of the house because she did not want to come back to look at the linking object, to look at his things. And then some people will hold on to them for years and years and years. So it's all part of what works best for you. And then the importance of anniversaries. And I talked about this at the beginning. Those first week, those first month, first 2 months leading up to the first year. And those days that lead up to those days, just allowing yourself some space with that, because you might be more tender, for sure. So
yeah, Tracy, I've got a comment here I thought I'd flash up because I can totally relate to this. This person says, my eldest is 15 and a half. His breed is usually 14 to 16 years. I've started thinking of the day he's beginning to have some issues. And that's the same. My dog is 14 and a half, and she's right in that 14 to 16 year window as well. So there's a lot of that anticipatory grief that you mentioned. And, sometimes days go by and that's all I can think about, especially if she's not having a good day. So I can imagine this person too experiences some of that.
yes, yeah. And thank you for the comment, and thank you for sharing, Tracy. And sometimes when it comes down to when we have to make that decision when they get older, it can be all consuming, and we'll watch them, very, very closely. Like, did they eat? Did they, and that can take a lot of energy out of us too, for sure. It's a very difficult time. It's agonizing, actually. In varying degrees. And then when you're like, oh, thank God they ate. Whew, okay. And then okay, or yeah, yeah, or they picked up their toy. They love their stuffy. Oh, thank God. And that's a very emotional roller coaster for us. And we can go into that crisis mode, the sympathetic reaction, nervous system reaction. So that's why self-care is a really important part of this as well. Taking care of yourself through this, because it is very difficult. Connecting with other people who really understand is also important. So I do want to talk about guilt and regret, because these are actually two of the most commonly shared feelings when it comes to companion animal loss. And one of the things often is making the decision about euthanasia. I've had people say to me, share with me, that they had to make a decision about their parent, but about the end of their parent's life, but that losing their animal was more difficult to make that decision. So, it is a difficult decision. And many people will say, I feel guilty, even though I know it's the right decision. I still feel guilty. The shoulda, woulda, couldas can just send us spinning. I should have taken them to the vet when I saw they weren't eating. I should have gone home at lunch. I should have gotten a pet sitter instead of boarding. I should have boarded instead of getting a pet sitter. I should have spent more time when they were a puppy. I mean, the list is endless with that. And part of the grieving process and healing process is to really have that compassion for yourself. But all of this is easier said than done, for sure. But acknowledging and allowing space for feelings that's what's really important. And honestly, ask yourself if you could have done anything differently. Sometimes we can make an ideal thing. And it's like, well, ideally I would have done this. Well, yeah. However, you had something going on with your kids at the same time. You had this going on, the thing at work. You had this. Were you really able to make a different decision than you did? And sometimes just really being honest with ourselves about it. It's like, no, but I wish I had. It's like, I understand. I do. But part of this is self forgiveness too, and self compassion. Also, talking about the relief. Some people will say that, and it could be because the animal isn't suffering anymore. Sometimes you can open up part of your house now. You've got more time. I've had some clients say, I can't believe how much time I have now, which they might not like, actually. Finances, because there are many reasons, but having an animal, even a healthy animal, can add up really quickly. And then when you throw in ER visits on top of that, or procedures or treatments on top of that, it can add up. So you can have better sleep sometimes, and maybe now is a time you can travel. And just if you've worked on your grief a little bit, just challenge that belief that you need to hold on to the pain and sadness to feel connected to them. Now, this is for people who have actually worked on their grief, not for people that are just starting out, or it was really recent, or you're in the middle of it now. But some people feel like it's almost a badge of honor that they have to hold on to pain and sadness. Like that's the only memory they can think about their babies. When I encourage people, after they've worked on it a little bit, to just kind of pan out and look at all the stories, and allow those moments of joy and silliness, because our animals are silly, aren't they? Some of them are just goofballs, and that's what we love about them. I do want to be clear, though, this is not about what we call toxic positivity. That's not what this is. And that's basically, just focus on all the happy thoughts. That can be very detrimental in a grieving process. All this is saying is just allowing all the facets to come in. Because some people are like, I want to hold on to that pain and sadness because I feel like the animal's back with me. But if you allow those other moments of, when they're being silly or they made you laugh so hard, to be a part of the grieving process, in addition to the sadness, then that's a more thorough grieving process. So any other thoughts or
Nope, nothing to share at this time.
Okay. So one of the things, if anybody wants to share, are these things that sometimes it's really with our animals, it's about missing the little things or the things that you especially loved about them. So if anybody wants to share that would be fantastic, because, many of us like to share about our animals. I mean, I could talk hours about, and most animal people will be like, you got an hour? I can tell you everything about my baby. My baby is so funny or so smart or so silly, or I can't believe what they did. But if anybody wants to share anything, sometimes it's the sensory things too, because one of the things about the loss is missing their physical bodies, their fur, the tactile parts of them. Sometimes, well, on a dog, you can find that spot on their behind where you just rub and they'll like lean into, which isn't always the best thing, but they, and they're like, oh, thank you. Some people love when their dogs did that. Again, that's not always the best thing, but they're, or some people will miss the smell. Some people with dogs will say that their pads on their feet smell like corn chips or tortilla chips or any popcorn, any snack food. They miss that smell of their pads. Or some dogs also, I actually find this hilarious, is if they're not allowed on the couch, but if they get up on the couch, they'll jump up and they'll tuck their front leg under and just go, oh, like this huge exhale. Like humans are so exhausting. Like I'm having to watch over you all the time. So these are the things that I'm talking about, allowing this to be part of the healing as well. So does anybody have anything to share?
Nope, everybody's staying quiet. I can understand. I would have a hard time sharing too and keeping
That's
a straight face. So
that's fine. Is there anything you want to share,
I
Tracy?
do not want to share. I do not want
Okay.
to be a blubbering. Let's
Oh,
see. Let's see. Monica's got a thought to share with us. She says, "Yes, my girl Holly's velvet ears. My
oh,
cat Carinia's used to sit on my shoulder. I miss the weight of her there."
yes. Thank you for sharing that, Monica. Yes, it's that weight. Yeah, kitties do not have great boundaries, but that's what we love about them. They'll sleep on your face, actually. But some dogs too will be, they'll wake you up right there, right? You can feel their breath before you even open your eyes. But those things for sure. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Monica. But those sensory parts are things. The velvety ears. Sometimes they have a really soft belly, or an ear that just like one ear will stand up, but one ear just can't get up, or a snaggle tooth or a kink in the tail. I mean, all these things that just may make them special. And they're each so special in their own way, even if they come from the same litter. I mean, those of you who've gotten litter mates, sometimes you're like, did you guys come from the same parents? Because you are so different.
Well,
um,
Terry has something to share with us
Great.
too.
Thank you,
So
Sharon.
Terry says, I'm dealing with feeling guilt over feeling some relief over the loss of both of my old mares. One was scheduled for euthanasia today, but Monday my other mare colicked due to a small intestine strangulation, and
Oh,
we chose to euthanize her to end her suffering, and so also euthanize Sandy at the same time. So they went together, which was devastating, but also I am relieved that Mama didn't have to grieve after losing Sandy. But honestly, there's also a large financial relief because, and then it cuts off. So I think that's all that StreamYard can see.
gosh,
So yeah, basically just she's had a hard week dealing with this
that's
and all the emotions that go with it.
absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing about that. Horses have a very special place in my heart, for sure. That is a lot of loss, and that could be the cumulative grief I was talking about before too. But yes, um, thank you for sharing just about that and for being honest about that. How difficult and devastating it was for you, but with bonded animals, some people will do that, especially with horses, for sure. So thank you for sharing so openly about that. We really appreciate that. Anybody else before we move on, Tracy?
Let's see. Monica had another thought. She said, "My dog Riley's sitting at the table in a chair when my kids were little for lunch, like one of the kids, or more like lunch monitor." Oh, that's sweet.
That is beautiful. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. Those are the things, and these are the stories that keep them alive in our hearts, right? I mean, because they're still alive in our hearts. And when we talk about them, that's where we bring them forward. The thing is, the love hasn't died. Our love hasn't died.
Right.
The only thing that has died is they're no longer physically here. So creating that new relationship with them, for sure. So just quickly about whether or not to get another animal, even if you have other animals. I People will ask me this. Just a few things that I always ask back. First of all, do you really want to get another animal? Because some people don't. But if they do, um, I just say when it can be most helpful when you truly understand this is not about replacing the one you've lost, because you'll never be able to replace them. Even if all you've had are Goldens, different personalities, even litter mates, they will never replace the one that you've lost. And that you found a special place in your heart for that animal or those animals, especially if they were what we call heart dogs, heart horses, heart cats. Now, it's normal to compare and say, well, my one golden did this, my new golden doesn't do this. But when it comes with um, sometimes resentment, it can turn into like a lose-lose where the people feel disappointed and resentful, and the new animal's like, can't you just love me for me? I mean, so when you've worked through enough and truly understand. The other thing too, are what are other family members wanting? Something to take into consideration. One of my clients said beautifully, I don't want my decision to get another animal to come from the depths of my grief. I thought that was really powerful. And then also, what will your life look like? Are you taking a big vacation soon? Are you pregnant? Are you moving? I mean, are there some big things that are coming up? Is now really the time? And then just a reminder of difference in energy levels. So if you've had older animals for a while, um, sometimes it's easy to forget how much energy puppies have, for example, or foals or kittens. And that's what we love about them. That's what we love, love, love about them. But oh my goodness, if we've had older animals for a while, leaving the Christmas tree up, if that's something that you do, might not work this year, or leaving your shoes out, because puppies are little goats, just these types of things. But so if you've gotten to a point where this is a good time, you want another animal, you truly understand this isn't about replacing, it's just adding to your family. I mean, goodness knows there are plenty of animals out there that need a home. So hopefully that was helpful in that decision making. Tracy, any comments or thoughts for?
No, we're good.
Okay. So just one of the things I always encourage my clients and people to do is what we call meaning making. So incorporating your idea of spirituality or religion into this new life. Now, if you identify as being agnostic, atheist, or humanist, we're just looking at existential beliefs here. So incorporating these bigger questions into your life. So because our animals are such a big part of our stories. And many people have said, we were meant to find each other. I've heard this over and felt this actually personally over and over and over. We were meant to find each other. I've heard many people say, I rescued him, but he really rescued me. It's also making meaning of their short lives to make meaning of yours. And starting a new path, a new awakening. What does that look like? Finding a purpose to that pain. Some people ask for signs. Some people believe in them. Some people get them. All these questions are very personal. But if this is something that resonates with you, where do you believe that your beloved animal is now? Just encourage you to think about this. Have you had any dreams about them? Do you believe that you'll see them again? So again, just thinking about these bigger questions as part of your healing. And then examining your own mortality. The fact that our animals age, quicker relative to humans, we can see the aging process. Some people are like, it's an opportunity for self-reflection on our own mortality if we take that opportunity. So how do I know that I'm healing? So it's really clear, it's really important to say it's not about a lack of emotion or no sadness. But some people will say, ironically, they feel like they're returning to the land of the living, so to speak. Energy and motivation starts to return. You can start to think about the animal with fondness, with not as much pain. Maybe an hour or a day's gone by, the pain is lessening, and previous triggers change into reminders. So that's how some of the things, and it's really about creating a new connection with your animal now that they're no longer physically here. So some ways to honor, because our grief needs a place to go. It needs space, it needs a voice, and it needs a place to go. So these are just some ideas, but you really are only bound by your creativity. There's really no bounds to this, no limits on what you can do to honor and celebrate your animal's life. And I always encourage what I call authentic symbolism. Have it be symbolic to you and be authentic to you. So one of the things I always recommend is creating a remembrance or a memory book. Now, if you're not a writer, then just opening a note on your phone or your laptop, just a place that's accessible and that you can put anything and everything in there. Pictures, stories, things you loved about your animals. I mean, anything and everything. The stories that made you laugh, the stories that made you cry. their little isms that they did. Did they follow you to the bathroom? Why did they get into the Thanksgiving turkey that one year? Did the kitty jump in the birthday cake? I mean, all the stories. What did they smell like? What did they look like? What did they feel like? What did they sound like? Everything in that book, because the way that our memories work, the details will start to fade. And I mean, I run weekly groups, and I do um, these presentations every week. And somebody said something, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I forgot. A monkey used to do that, and I wrote it in his little book. So that's one thing I really recommend. Some people will hold a memorial service, especially everybody in your dog park family, or the golden dog company. I mean, all the people that knew your neighborhood, your family, your friends. It's one thing to remember things about our babies, but then when you hear other people talk about them in a loving way, it can be very powerful. Lighting a candle, planting a tree, a flower, a bush. We planted a butterfly garden in honor of Monkey and our other kitties we lost. I still say good morning and good night to them. That's just something that I still do. That wake up, open the door, morning babies, every morning. That's what we do. I do anyway. I writing to them, writing their obituaries. We do this for people, and some of the things that people will write in their obituaries for their animals are just beautiful. I laugh, I cry. I mean, they're just beautifully written. Some people will get a tattoo or paint, sculpt, write, draw, or have them commissioned, creating a memorial or an urn, thanking the veterinary staff if that's something that feels good to you. If you celebrate holidays, creating a holiday ornament for them. My husband and I were just talking earlier tonight. This was our first Halloween without Monkey, and this will be our first holiday without Monkey. And so that, he will have his stocking, and we'll probably do something special with the stocking. Some people, from their dish or their bowl, they'll make a planter into it and encircle it with the collar. Donating your finances, time, items. If you walked at a park, donating a bench. Again, you're only bound by your creativity, and you can do any of these things or anything that you can think of at different times. One person said she had lost a purebred golden, and it was very important to her to get a ring with her animal's name on it, but it had to be a gold ring because she lost a golden retriever. Someone else had shared that their dog loved to go on car rides, loved car rides. And so she put their collar on the rear view mirror, and now they can take car rides still. So just whatever feels authentic to you. And these are ways not necessarily to eradicate the grief, but again, giving our grief a place to go. So some resources that I think might be helpful: the Association of Pet Loss and Bereavement. I'm a member of that. The Ralph site is really a great one. And they're also I know they're on Facebook, very active on there. And then Lap of Love is just an outstanding organization.
We actually have Lap of Love presenting to us next Wednesday.
Oh, well, there you go.
As a follow-up, which is great.
They're fantastic. So I just want to thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope this was helpful for you. Just knowing that you're not alone is so important. This is my novel that is published on Amazon, but I'm working on a nonfiction self-help book after you've lost an animal. And I hope to publish that next year. That's my goal. So thank you so much. It's always an honor to hold space and talk about this issue and this topic with people, because our animals really do connect us. So are there any last minute thoughts or questions before we wrap up?
Yeah, Tracy, this was just wonderful. Thank you for the wealth of information and the depth at which you went with all of your ideas and your tips and your resources. Very, very helpful. And I know there's a lot of people watching who have, experienced death with a beloved pet, that this will very touch their heart and help them to heal. I know Monica's got an interesting or a cute story here to kind of finish us up here for the night. She says, "I remember my son's two-grade class all wrote notes to me or family when my rough collie Calvin died. The class had met him several times and were quite fond of him."
That is
That's wonderful.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Oh, that 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 is so beautiful. Thank you, Monica, for sharing that.
yeah, that's a
Oh,
great story. What a great way to get the community involved with, memorializing and remembering.
absolutely. And also, allowing children to be a part of this too. That's a big
Mm,
part. Children are really wonderful
yeah, I
coming
agree.
with ideas and also normalizing how important it is to validate this grief.
Cindy's
Yes,
got a parting thought as well. She says, "My last dog was put to sleep at a large hospital in Massachusetts, and they have a social dog therapist to help people with their grief, and she runs support groups."
that's fantastic. Yeah, the social workers that they have at different veterinary hospitals are very helpful.
Yeah,
So glad she
absolutely.
had that.
Especially when you're going through it for your first time with a pet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It could still be painful on the 10th time too, though.
Oh, absolutely. But I think until you experience it for the first time or death for the
Yeah,
first time,
that's right.
it's you just don't know what to do, and to have that support system and have that community is
That's
very helpful.
absolutely.
So Terry says, "Thank you so much. It truly helps knowing that this mix of emotions is normal."
Oh, thank you for that comment, Terry. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
So Tracy, I can't thank you enough for your time spending the evening with us, and just helping all of us to better understand death and grief. Very helpful. I hope we can have you back again in the future.
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to. Again, this is a really important part of my life's work. There have been so many animals who have touched my life. I really feel like this is a part of my uh, it's just a big part of who I am. So I'm so grateful that it's helpful to other people as well.
Yes, I agree. And thank you to everybody for watching and for your comments and for sharing. It's very helpful. And hopefully it was cathartic for you to share that information and hear all this, all these great stories, and this in-depth information from Tracy. So we appreciate your time and your sharing as well.
Yes,
All right.
absolutely.
So thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. It was a great conversation. If you are watching this on the replay and you have questions for Tracy, just feel free to leave that information in the comments, and we will make sure that she gets that information and we'll get you some answers, if that is needed, or if you just want to share about your dear pets, we'd love to hear that as well. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and have a great evening. Take care.
Thank you. Bye bye.